So, good evening. Tonight I wanted to show you a couple of the Bosch Jetronic test and service stations they used to use at the Bosch Service Centers or the Bosch car repair places. And as you can see, this is a later version of this, and that actually has a KDJEP 200 built in. And you can see this here on the side, and then you have several connections here to hook up to the fuel distributor. You have a fuel return flow measuring unit, and then for the individual outputs, and then here you can hook up the EHA valve, for instance, or you have just a resistor output here, or you can measure currents. This is in conjunction with the frequency valves, which they use, actually not frequency valve, timing valves, where they're called correctly takt frequency. And then here you can adjust, for instance, temperatures. And here you have the pressure gauges. And actually the interesting thing is the fuel supply for the system is underneath this mat here. This was a tray you could take out, and there was a gasoline tank in here. And I think that held about a gallon or better, maybe, probably a gallon or so. And this was used to calibrate actually all the K and KE, or mostly K Jetronic systems from 1974 on, or earlier ones, for Porsche, BMW, Saab, and Mercedes, and basically anything what had the Bosch Jetronic built in. And this is like a model from 1979. And as you can see, this says on top here, Bosch Centro Jetronic. And the reason why is because of the fuel underneath here. You can imagine, if you have ever heard of OSHA and similar institutions, is they went out of use very quickly after like one or two repair shops burned out, or they had a, explosion, a fume explosion, that kind of stuff. This photo I got from a Bosch Service Center in Argentina, which still uses that today. So these units are still used throughout Latin America, where they don't know what OSHA is, or job safety. The other place I found in Argentina is a small shop, I forgot in which town it was, and he basically built this unit here, half of the of this unit here. He basically put the 2 meters in here, and he has partially this stuff in here. He eliminated or didn't replicate the electronic part of it, but this was the big setup for all of this. So he built himself his own little test center here. That is quite something else, and he used the KDJEP 300. These things are still quite common down there in Latin America. And then I think in this picture we can see really nicely on how he did this. He built a stand. This is now the earlier versions of the fuel distributor, where you can adjust the flow rates on the top. And you can see he put a micrometer on here, and he has a lever here with an adjustment screw. So he can change the 3 settings, between idle, medium load, and full load. And then he can read this and select this here, and he got his fuel pressure pumps. And of course you can see here's the tray. He built it basically exactly the same way. Underneath this hole here is where the gas tank actually is. You can fill the gasoline in there. And so his fuel pumps are residing in here too. And you're basically hooking this up the same way you would have it in the car. You can incorporate in this system the warm-up regulator, or pressure adjusting element. That is another term I found out today. Bosch used for this, and you can see the different pressure settings then, and he could hook this up. Also, there's 2 more ports here. where he can read then the upper and lower pressure or the system and the control pressure in the system. And this is a pretty neat setup. So if you wanted to build something like this, for the early versions from 1974 until 1986, you would have to use this setup. On the later versions from 1986 on, where the adjustment screws for the flow are underneath here, you would have to basically flip the unit around. And I wanted to show you this today, just to give you an idea of what these things actually could look like it. And then I found one more unit, which is also Bosch South America or Latin America. This is their tester for the regular electrically or electronically controlled fuel injectors to test the flow rate. In this case, they had 6 of them. And you can see this. This is a special liquid. This is not fuel. So they're not as dangerous to operate as the other ones. In these units here, with the KDJE, you have to use fuel. The same octane rating is what runs normally through the car, basically. That's what you have to do. And on this one here, they used a liquid where you can better see this, which sprays through these. And you could adjust then the pulse numbers and the pressure regulation and that sort of stuff for the different injector valves. And that was turned on and off here. So all the pump parts, filters, and what have you, and the reservoir with the return and everything else, collector, is here on the bottom. And it also had the stop function on it. So here you can see the pressure, and here you can time this. You do it exactly for 30 seconds or 15 seconds or 1 minute. And that counts backwards, and it will operate all 6 of them. In this case, this was for, I guess, for a maximum of 6. You can then test them out. This was one thing I forgot to mention in my other video, is the fuel distributor is always tested at the flow rate without the injectors, because the injectors can vary with the flow throughput depending upon condition, and they will alter the actual output of the fuel distributor. So you always want to test the fuel distributor flow rate completely separate with the injectors out of the picture. And you want to use a setup similar to this here. You could do this without pulsing it by just creating a pressure line and hooking all 6 or 8 up, and then have a time pump function where you open and close the valve exactly, running it for 30 seconds or 60 seconds, and then measure the accumulated volume of fuel which came out there, including the spray pattern. This way you have immediately an idea, on a 4, 6, or 8 cylinder of what that would look like it. And the other thing is the youngest viewers now, that is the age group from, I think, 14 to 24, they are now amounting to 1% of the viewers. And what I found interesting, because one of these very young viewers has left a message, and they had asked me if I could do more shorts. Now, if you are in that age group from 14 to 24, and you have lasted now the last 9 minutes of this video to this point, let me just say this. This stuff, from an educational material point of view, is not something you can really present in a short video. And at one point or another, you guys need to come around when you watch our videos here and take a deep, deep breath, or multiple, and just relax and unwind in front of your device, whatever you're using to watch the videos, and just starting to listen. Listening is an art. A lot of people don't know how to listen. These videos which we're making here are educational videos, and the primary purpose is to explain fairly complicated processes in a pretty simple way. That's just, but we're very happy to have you here. We hope you guys are going to come around and get more patience and are able to absorb what we are presenting here in these videos to your own benefit. because you probably can learn a lot here. But again here, this is a pretty neat setup. So if you ever wondered on how this is done correctly, so you can adjust this, then this would be your way to do it. Again, I would forewarn anyone who wants to make a machine, build a machine like this, or a setup with the built-in tank and pumps, filter, and the what is the other part there with the filters, the not the compensator, the now I forgot it, the accumulator. There we go. The accumulator, you basically have to replicate your rear fuel system, fuel delivery system with tank and return, the same way you have it in your car. And you have then these ports coming out here. And then you also can provide a metering gauge here to hook up to the top or to your warm-up regulator, and then the return from the warm-up regulator with a 12-volt power supply in here, so you can actually hook it up and integrate it into the circuit. And the same would be true on the electronic part here. On this unit here, if you would go to this here, you would have here the output either for frequency valve, and in later versions, which I designed some of the stuff for, had the output for the EHA valve, where we could simulate the temperature here and actually incorporate, or had incorporated, the ECU into the system, so you can actually simulate this completely with different temperatures, and you can then measure the fuel flows under various different conditions. And this was part of this unit here I wanted to mention, was this can actually emulate the oxygen sensor. This is why this is slightly more complex, because you're putting actually a reference voltage out, since it is a thermocouple they got in there, where the other temperature sensors are resistive, which would be your water coolant temperature here with 2 pins. You can put that then in there, oxygen sensor, and you basically can use this either as a TD signal generator, or you can actually do the actual 50-50 duty cycle, or so 60-40 duty cycle they used on the timing valves in the earlier versions of the K Jetronic for the 1980 model of the 450 SEL, 450 SL, and the 450 SLC as it was called, and then the first generation W126. I thought I'm going to present this to you. I'm still working on my unit, and that's why I looked around today of some of the things, trying to find some pictures of the stuff. These units here are pretty much extinct in the United States and Europe. They went out almost as soon as they were introduced, and the first car repair facilities went up in flames because of people smoking next to these machines and having the tank here or the hoses blow up, or you have fumes developing, and you had some fume combustions. That kind of stuff happened, and I don't know if anyone got killed, but there were probably injuries and lawsuits, so they took them out of the markets here in the United States. Those were the best units they had, because you can really test the entire car or every aspect of it. So if we can build something like this at a reasonable cost, I think that would be the main objective here. And with that, you have a great evening.